Welcome to Stories After Midnight. Today, we'll be reading a story called I Met a Boy with Fireflies in His Eyes. As a kid, he solved mysteries in a town that does not exist, by Trash Tia. It's also worth noting that this story is more of a prequel to the Strings Murder series, so keep that in mind, and if you haven't seen the Strings Murder series, look for it on my channel. It's under I Was Forced to Become a Puppet. But if you search Strings Murders, you should be able to see it on YouTube or podcasts, wherever else you're looking. So there is that. And a huge shout out to my patrons for helping make this episode possible. And without any more rambling, let's get started. I had no idea I was talking to a dead body. Jasper Carrington was the type of guy I thought I'd never meet. His grin was sweet and a little crooked, a mop of brown curls he kept playing with, and eyes I swore were filled with fireflies. Dressed in a long trench coat, his style was endearing, a short-sleeved shirt and skinny jeans. I wondered if this guy was trying to cosplay Sherlock Holmes. I was trying to drown my thoughts of bad test scores and a barista job I hated, when he popped out of nowhere, plonking down a fresh drink in front of me. I did see him a little before, when I was heading to the bathroom. Pushing through the crowd, I was scanning for the ladies when I saw him. He was sitting with two others, their heads pressed together in deep conversation. His companions looked like they were close to him. The girl was a willowy brunette hiding under a straw hat, while the guy reminded me of a grown-up Percy Jackson, a scowling, freckly blonde who kept snapping at him to pay attention. I caught his wandering gaze, mid-eye roll, and the crowd around me seemed to disappear, the 80s ballad I had been swaying to dulling to a low murmur. Maybe I had been drugged, I thought dizzily. The world wasn't supposed to stop, reality coming to a halt. It was like being plunged underwater. For a moment, there was just me and the boy with fireflies in his eyes. I thought I was seeing things, caught in a dizzying lull of post-reality. I was transfixed, my body still swaying back and forth. I was seeing things, surely. Nope. This guy had fireflies dancing in his pupils, tiny balls of yellow light, almost like fairy dust. I tried to look away. I did, and the world resumed around me. The song had changed, a loud thrum of drum and bass rattling my ears. I risked another look, and this time Firefly was staring at me, his lips pricking into a smile. The sandy blonde noticed, grumbling something, and he twisted back around, downing his drink so fast the girl hit him playfully. I watched the three of them, intrigued by their dynamic. They acted like siblings, shoving each other and arguing over who was getting the next drinks, but they seemed close, closer than friends. When Firefly leaned his head into the sandy blonde guy, comfortably burying his face in his friend's shoulder, I half wondered if they were something more. I lost interest when my mind started getting a little foggy. Fast forward an hour, and he was slumping into the seat opposite me, sliding over a fresh drink. I twisted around to see his friend's reaction, but they seemed to be having a drinking competition. From the look of it, the girl was winning. Firefly didn't even introduce himself, instead leaning forward, a playful quirk in his brow. "Did you know I used to solve mysteries?" His words immediately intrigued me, pulling me from suffocating brain fog. I found myself transfixed by the lights in his eyes, tiny golden fireflies dancing around his iris. Maybe they were contacts, I thought. He definitely seemed like the type of guy who wanted attention. I wouldn't put it past this Sherlock wannabe to be wearing funky contacts that automatically caught eyes. Still, though, his odd way of sliding into my life was endearing. I took the drink, coasting the glass across the table with my index. Oh yeah? In the corner of my eye, Firefly's friends were definitely watching us. Or watching him. What kind of mysteries? He opened his mouth before I cut him off. "You have glowing dots in your eyes," I said. "Is that like a condition?" Jazz. His smile widened, and I found myself liking it. "Huh? My name." He offered his hand. "Jasper Carrington. Also Jazz." Instead of shaking his hand, I gave him an awkward high five. "Freddie," I said. "You didn't answer my question. What kind of mysteries?" Jazz shrugged, his chin coming to lazily rest on his fist. "I don't know. I've been solving mysteries since I was a little kid." He offered me a shoulder shake. "All kinds, I guess. We actually saved our town when we were 5th graders." Nodding along, I took another drink, wincing at the burn at the back of my throat. I wasn't expecting vodka. Leaning forward, I sucked my teeth. "So you were like a wannabe Nancy Drew?" Jazz scoffed. More like Scooby-Doo. I twisted behind me, eyeing his friends. Sandy Hair was trying to get up to stretch, and the girl was snoozing in his lap. The two were bickering, the girl mumbling something about her body getting tired and him calling her a lightweight. When he hovered his drink over her head, she squeaked, rolling off of his knees. "I'm up," she shrieked behind me, her voice caught in a giggle. "Why do you have to resort to violence?" His laugh was light. I caught the tinge of a British accent. "Mate, you were the one who fell asleep in my lap." He downed the rest of his drink, almost dropping it when she shoved him. Hard. "That's not an excuse to pour a drink on me." "Okay, yeah. But to actually pour a drink on you. That doesn't matter. You were going to." "Exactly," the guy said. "I rest my case." Jazz groaned when the girl shoved Sandy Hair again, hard enough to knock him off his chair. "You're insufferable," the brick grumbled, stumbling to his feet. The girl laughed, offering him a hand. "And you're not?" Turning away from their back and forth, I couldn't resist a smile. Jazz looked done with the both of them, hiding behind his own drink like they were embarrassing him. "I'm guessing those two are your mystery-solving pals?" "Peter and Sonny?" He pulled a face. "More like my Shaggy and Scooby." He made me laugh again. "And you're Daphne?" His expression crumpled. There were rare moments when the real him started to bleed through. I noticed his fingers tightening around his drink, eyes suddenly distant, like he was searching for their missing member. "I don't know," he said. "I can't really find her." "Find her?" He shrugged. "Yeah, she left us a long time ago. We haven't seen her since." It was getting harder to take this guy seriously. "And you guys caught bad guys?" Jazz's expression brightened. Sort of, I guess." He winked. "We started solving mysteries as kids. Small things like finding lost cats and missing vegetables. It was fun. We took down our druggy janitor and even found a baby." He leaned back. "Then we grew up and the world got darker, less of a playground. When we started high school, it became evident we had pissed off a lot of people. Our kindergarten janitor tried to kill us after we put him in jail when we were 6, and Peter and Eve were almost butchered in his basement." He scrunched up his nose. "We were 13, already solving murders and finding kidnapped kids. It started to hit us that the town we wanted to protect was trying to kill us." Once again, the music and the chatter around me dulled to a low murmur, lights blurring together. It was just me and him. Jazz slid his glass up and down the table, his mind clearly elsewhere. "We were just kids. We thought we were doing good, helping catch bad guys. We had our own little gang. The 4 of us thought we were untouchable and that nobody could hurt us because we were young." He caught my eye, his expression darkening. It was only for a second, and I was still a little drunk, but I could have sworn his eyes were hollow, and I was staring directly into oblivion itself. Jazz sighed, tracing the rim of his glass with his index. His laugh was cold, like splintered ice. "You'd be surprised how many townspeople would murder a group of kids to hide their corruption." I nodded, fully embroiled in his story. "Wait, so did the psychos in this town try to kill you?" Jazz's gaze wandered again. "Well, when we were kids, no matter how close we were to unraveling their corruption, they couldn't just kill a group of kids." He tipped his head back, blowing a raspberry. "So, being a kid kind of protected us. I think the worst thing that happened to me as a child was being held hostage by a crazy old woman." I sputtered out a laugh. "You're not serious." His expression told me otherwise, scarlet cheeks and eyes that refused to meet mine. "Let me explain," he said, quickly, motioning for me to stop choking. "So, we were 8 years old investigating a case of missing carrots, and I decided to sneak into her house." I cut him off. "Did you just say missing carrots?" Jazz wasn't laughing. "It's not funny." He folded his arms, almost mimicking his little self scrunching up his nose. "This old woman was a psycho. She meant business. I was dragged into her house and threatened with a World War II grenade. I was just a kid, so I happily ate the cookie she offered me, but she was definitely a psychopath." I was in awe, trying to hold in my giggles. "Over carrots?" He nodded solemnly. "Award-winning carrots." I don't think he realized how intentionally hilarious he was being. Jazz downed half of his drink. "But like I said, nobody in our town was going to touch us when we were little kids. We could technically do what we wanted, and we did. The worst that could happen was being grounded." He He studied his glass, swirling the dregs around. When we grew up, it was a different story. The guy leaned back with a sigh. By the 5th grade, we were dipping our toes in crazier stuff. Like? I prompted. He avoided my gaze. We were kidnapped a few times. A few? I teased him, and he rolled his eyes. Several times, he coughed, awkwardly, running his hands through his hair. Several hundred times, Peter corrected behind us, shooting me a grin. You're kidding, I said. Jazz pouted. I actually learned the art of speaking through a gag. I was suddenly giddy, high on the idea of him as a little teen detective. That's adorable. Jazz inched away from me like I was going to tug at his cheeks. They captured me a lot, he grumbled. Sure, they liked terrorizing us as a 4, but I was always the damsel in the distress who was dragged away to secondary locations. Jazz caught my eye, scrunching his nose. I know you want to laugh, but I was almost killed, like multiple times. He was right. I was already choking on my drink. Those bastards really liked stringing me up in the sawmill. He shooed away my hands when I teasingly grabbed him. It's not funny. I'd get snatched by some freak on my way to school and then I'd wake up hanging upside down. I couldn't help it. Did all the blood go to your head? He stuck out his tongue, mimicking his younger self. Maybe. This time, I laughed out loud, surprised by my own giggles. Jazz curled his lip. I'm struggling to find what you find so funny, Freddy. I was hanging upside down for hours. He raised his voice. Thanks to someone. Peter twisted around, shooting him the finger. And we did come eventually. Yeah, like 5 hours later, Jazz shot back. He tutted. Honestly, they're the worst. I would be 10 seconds from being gutted and those guys were sharing milkshakes in the coffee shop. Ouch, I said, trying to sound serious. Any other mysteries you solved? He scoffed, his lips pricking into a smirk. Oh, I'm sorry. Is my childhood trauma not horrifying enough for you? I gave a shoulder shrug. It's PG-13 Stephen King at best. Jazz raised a brow. I mean, it was, he said, until our cases went from identifying vegetables to identifying bodies. His sudden change in tone snapped something inside my mind. I was keenly aware of my drink creeping its way back up my throat in a sour paste. In the space of a year, townspeople were going missing, being brutally murdered, and our sheriff was an incompetent buffoon. His eyes turned dark. The first case that sent us to therapy was the case of bodies being found positioned like they were flying. The faraway look in his eyes sobered me up. Hell, so this guy wasn't kidding about his weird childhood. I straightened up. Flying? Jazz nodded. Yeah, we called them angels. He shook his head with a sigh, raking his fingers down his face. We were only 13. Like, dude, we were still in middle school. You can imagine what that does to a 13-year-old. There were 3 bodies and all of them were little kids. We didn't know what we were doing, because this was adult crime now. We weren't investigating petty crimes anymore. I already knew we were out of our depth. That we were going to get ourselves killed. Jazz's eyes rolled over to his friends, the two of them talking quietly. So, did you quit? I asked. Quit, he spluttered. When a whole town expected us to save them from bad people? It's a lot of weight on a kid. He laughed bitterly. You think? So, what you're saying is you were stubborn, I said. Very, Jazz winked. Now, we were scared, duh, but we thought that's what the town wanted, for us to save them. He sighed. We became, targets, I guess. The bad guys we caught when we were children wanted our heads on silver platters, and the corrupt townspeople we managed to expose, like our greedy, money-laundering sheriff, for example, wanted to seal our mouths for good. Something ice-cold prickled down my spine. I could tell this wasn't Jazz's story anymore. This had really happened, and from the vacant look in his eyes, it hurt him to recall it. I thought he was a stranger with an imagination. I thought he was cosplaying as an eccentric detective. Instead, this boy was trauma dumping. I felt bad for laughing earlier. You had a messed up town, Jazz Carrington, I said, stealing some of his drink. And a messed up dad, he muttered. My stepdad was the mayor, the king of corruption and master manipulator. Dad was the one pulling strings from the start. He drove my mom to hang herself and then had the audacity to demand I call him my father. He controlled everything, so it's not like I could run away. Jazz's smile was sickly. After I exposed him at our winter festival with the others, he locked me in my room for almost a week. His gaze flicked behind me. Luckily, Peter came to my rescue, and I started sleeping in the back of his dad's van. It wasn't ideal, he murmured. It was freezing cold at night, and sometimes the door would blow open. I had one blanket, and I couldn't warm myself up no matter how hard I tried. But hey, it was better than being stuck at home. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to hug him. "That's child abuse," I whispered. "You were 15. He mumbled into his glass. "Not in our town." I tightened my fingers around my own drink. "In what town was this?" Jazz didn't look at me, glaring down his glass. "I don't know, it was just a town." "Uh-huh," I nodded. "You don't even know the name of the place you grew up in?" The boy rolled his eyes. "Does the phrase childhood trauma mean nothing to you?" "Your dad was a monster, dude," I said, leaning across the table. He burped. "Indeed. But," he made a poof noise. There's always a but. Ignoring him, I prodded the table. "You can't just forget the name of your town." "Chesterville," he said, his frown deepening. "Wait, no. It was Middleview. Those are 2 different towns." He shrugged. "Well, I just remembered 2 different names." Jazz prodded the table, tracing the grains. I found myself lost in the way he lost himself, his thoughts wandering, reliving his early teenage years. Anyway, my dad sucked, sure, but that wasn't even our most messed up case. By the time we were 16, our town was actively trying to kill us. We saved a girl only to find out her kidnapper was the son of our middle school janitor. He sighed. "It's almost like the moment we stopped being kids. The floodgates opened and strangers were trying to murder us. Peter was drugged and thrown in the back of an Uber. He only got away because he managed to call me before he passed out. Sonny and Eve were almost butchered, and I narrowly missed getting my brains carved out." "How?" I didn't even get to finish. "Wood chipper?" Jazz's mouth curled. "Did I mention we had a cannibalistic cult after us too?" "You didn't." I needed another drink. I was starting to feel kind of nauseous. "Yeah," the boy groaned, tipping his head back. "So this cult believed that we were the ones who messed up the town by trying to save it. So they were convinced if they purify the 4 of us, then the town would be saved." He quoted the air, rolling his eyes. "Saved." I swallowed. "And by purify?" "They had separate rituals planned for us," Jazz said, his voice breaking a little. "Even Sonny were supposed to be gutted, their entrails fed to the earth like a sacrifice or a gift." His gaze fell on the table. "Peter was planned to be fed through a wood chipper, and me?" He slid over his empty glass. "Guess." I caught it with my index. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Tied to a tree in stone?" Worse. Jazz's grin was starting to unnerve me. "They wanted me as a king." I must have looked horrified because he made it worse. "Well, they wanted my dead body as a king." He leaned his chin on his fist. "Apparently, they believed keeping my body intact was for the good of the town, which is a whole other level of messed up." He laughed. "We were just kids trying to fight corruption, and this gang of 11-year-olds were playing our Final Destination-style deaths." I almost spat out my drink. "The cannibal cult was 11 years old?" He pulled a face. "Well, that's what we concluded. Peter found blood on a spoon when we broke into their treehouse, so yeah, definitely cannibals." I saluted him with my drink, too baffled to speak. Jazz played with his glass. "Our worst case was probably the string murders. People were being found dead in piles of thread, like puppets cut from strings." His eyes darkened, and I could see something inside, what he was trying to hide. That was our last mystery, and we didn't even solve it. Jazz's eyes flicked to his friends. He almost looked lost, tracing the rim of his glass. "It's not like we could continue." He paused, his eyes flickering. "Our most valuable member left us. We were just kind of stuck." He tapped the table in a slow beat. "Stuck," Jazz mumbled, staring straight through me. I'm not sure how to describe how truly helpless he looked, like he was still stuck, trapped with his abusive father, with no way out. Tap, 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 went his fingers on the table. He slowly inclined his head, his eyes lost in oblivion. I can't remember where she went, Jazz whispered. She was there, and then she was gone. I reached for his hand, but he tugged away. The other member? Jazz didn't respond, and it was like I was talking to a memory. I try to reach her, but she's too far away, Jazz whispered, his voice breaking. She left us. I noticed his hands clenched into fists. I had no idea how much this lost member meant to him. Maybe this person protected him from his father. She left us alone, and it was so... His head twitched suddenly, lips curling into a scowl. So damn dark. His eyes were lost, hollow caverns I couldn't find. So cold. Jazz. I reached across the table, entangling my fingers with his. Your town tried to kill you multiple times, I said, gently nudging him. They didn't deserve to be saved. His gaze snapped to me, suddenly, frightened. What did I say the name of my town was again? Chesterville? His eyes saw right through me, lost, swimming in nothing. Right, he breathed. Chesterville. His fingers continued, tap, tap, tapping. What did I say my name was? His eyes were suddenly wide, almost childlike. The kid was frowning at me like I was a stranger. Jazz Carrington, I spoke softly, resisting the urge to squeeze his hand. The boy nodded, blinking slowly. Yeah, that's my name. Are you okay? I whispered. Whatever happened back then wasn't your fault, Jazz. You were just a kid. Jazz snapped out of it, blinking rapidly, and I caught them again, the golden blur of fireflies swimming in his pupils. The corners of his mouth twitched, like reality had hit him. He wasn't stuck anymore. He was in the present, moving forward. It was almost like he'd woken up from a long dream, his gaze lazily drinking me in, as if for the first time. Yeah, his tone was surprisingly cold. My town sucked. Leaning back, I held my breath. Please tell me you got away from that place. He raised a brow. I'm sitting here, aren't I? I wasn't sure all of him was. With the night winding down, I took the opportunity to make a swift getaway. His life was interesting, sure, but this boy needed a licensed therapist. I served coffee for a living, and I was failing my classes. Not exactly the best person to go to. It was nice meeting you, Jazz, I said, my voice shaking. I moved to get up, only for him to pull me back down. Wait, you're leaving? It's late. I should get home. His lips curved into a smirk. Okay, but before you go... He leaned forward, his breath surprisingly cold, tickling my ear. Do you want to see my party trick? Sure, I said dryly, shoving him away. He stood up, spreading his arms out like Peter Pan. Watch. I don't know what I expected. This guy seemed pretty unhinged, but it's not like it was his fault. He was an adult man dwelling on some seriously messed up childhood trauma. I figured his party trick was a card game or a stray pigeon flying out of his coat. When the warm glow of fireflies, that light I had somehow gotten used to, fizzled out suddenly, his eyes rolling to the back of his head, I realized he wasn't screwing around. Jazz's body flopped down, his head hitting the table with a thunk. Like a puppet cut from its strings, a hysterical screech started to build in my throat. When I tried to pull his head up, I glimpsed pooling black stemming across the table, leaking from his nose. Blood that was thick and congealing, a thick black paste oozing from every orifice. By the time I was screaming, so was everybody else, panicking. I looked for Jazz's friends, but they were gone. The emergency services were called, and I stayed with his body, trying to ignore how wrong it felt in my hands. His fingers felt rubbery, like his skin had been dead for days, not minutes. A gray-looking paramedic told me Jazz had died 2 days earlier from a suspected brain hemorrhage, and his name was not Jasper Carrington, or even Jazz. He was called Kai Bellows, which was impossible. I felt numb. Standing outside my car, my keys clenched in my hands, I was trembling. When warm hands landed on my shoulder, I found myself face to face with a younger college guy with reddish-brown hair, a Letterman jacket hanging off his shoulder. I opened my mouth to cry out for help, before the kid broke out into a grin, rivulets of red pooling from his mouth. His grin didn't match the boy. This kid wasn't used to smiling, the skin of his face stretching like he was made of plastic. I lost my breath, my gaze finding tiny specks of golden light ignited around his iris. Fireflies. "What do you think?" The boy's voice was deeper. "Pretty cool, right?" It took me a moment to realize the tiny specks of light inside his eyes was Jazz, and the college boy was nothing more than his flesh puppet. Every fiber of my being was telling me to run, and yet I was frozen, hypnotized by the fireflies. Footsteps sounded, and I glimpsed his friend standing several feet away. Sonny's head was comfortably sandwiched in Peter's shoulder. Instead of responding to Jazz, I nodded to them. "Are they like you?" Jazz's smile dimmed. You'd be surprised how many townspeople would happily murder a group of kids. I dazedly watched my breath hit the air in clouds of white. "They did kill you." He shrugged. "That's what we're guessing." "Guessing?" "Yeah." Jazz prodded his temple. "Like I said, we kinda have messed up memories." I watched Sunny wrap her arms around Peter, nuzzling her face in his neck. "And what exactly are you?" I risked a step closer to him, prodding his eye. "A wanderer," he said. "We're just trying to find out what happened to us." I let my fingertips tiptoe across his cheek. He was so cold, buzzing with electricity. "But he is dead." "But he is dead," I said, stepping back. "The body you're inhabiting." Jazz chuckled, prodding me in the cheek. "Geez, you're making me sound like a body snatcher. I'm just a floater, dude." When I didn't respond, he sighed, tipping his head back, firefly eyes finding the sky. "When we find out what happened to us, we'll leave." His gaze tracked a star. You know, find peace or whatever. The first night I met Jazz, I saw him as nothing more than a lost soul. Jazz was a drifter, a being who failed to pass on with the ability to jump through others. He followed me home that night, and I woke to him making breakfast in my kitchen. Sunny was snoozing on my bedroom floor like a cat, and Peter was flipping through news channels trying to find evidence of their murders. The problem was, neither of them knew the exact name of the town. Jazz didn't know who he was or why he was. All he knew was that he and his friends were murdered. The three of them attached themselves to me, like parasites, but they didn't take over my body. Instead, they kind of became housemates. I didn't agree with the proposal at first, until Jazz suggested they take up chores while I was in class, in exchange for my hospitality and resources in helping them find their killers. The three of them cleaned up my mess of an apartment, and they did a damn good job. Sunny baked cupcakes, and was obsessed with Netflix, while the boys set up their own mini detective office in my lounge, covering my walls with notes, scribbles depicting what they remembered. I would get home late, immediately tripping over whatever evidence they managed to find. The facts were: 1. The fourth member was not dead. 2. They were murdered after they graduated high school. 3. Their murderer was definitely someone in town who they knew. 4. The three's memories had been tinkered with. Example, Jazz's inability to remember the name of the town, as well as confusion when they died. Sunny was insistent they were 15, while the boys were sure they were 18 after graduating high school. Peter was sure the town was Middleview. Jazz and Sunny were insistent on Chesterville. It was almost as if they were remembering, or misremembering, two separate lives. As days and weeks grew into months, I found myself getting closer to these wandering souls. They became less of a burden and more like genuine friends. Peter stayed up most nights, glaring at the murder board. I offered him coffee and he accepted with a grateful nod. His eyes were a lot more prominent in the dark, brighter than the others. When he got bored with their mini investigation, he opened up about his own life. Peter was the fourth member of their detective gang, an ex-private school kid joining them in the 4th grade. "I kinda forced myself into their group," Peter admitted with a laugh. I was intrigued. "Forced?" "Yeah." He sipped his coffee, resting his feet on the coffee table. I heard about these kid detectives and I wanted to join. His lips curled into a frown. I had no idea how psycho our town was. I nodded slowly. But you don't. I trailed off and he sat up with a sigh. No. Peter set his coffee on the floor, the fireflies in his eyes dimming. I have no idea what happened to us. He cocked his head. Well, there is this one thing. He stood up warily, striding over to the wall. Peter prodded at their notes scrawled on the board, specifically where he'd written String Factory. You think you died in a string factory? I asked. No, that would be stupid. He turned to me, rolling his eyes. But I do think something definitely happened inside the string factory. I followed his gaze. Do you have memories? Nah, Peter laughed, slumping back onto the couch. Just a feeling. Sunny would sneak into my room during the night, hanging upside from the bottom of my bed. She would talk for hours about their childhood, the cases they used to solve. I learned more about their missing member, Eve. The girl's grin splintered when she mentioned Eve, before quickly changing the subject. Sunny's beaming was sweet, and in the pitch dark, the fireflies in her eyes ignited. She flopped onto my bed, burying her head in a pillow. Oh, can I tell you about the time I single-handedly saved Noah on my very first day? Sitting up in bed, I peered at the girl. Noah? She lifted her head, warm eyes finding mine. I was still getting used to the whole taking over a dead body thing. Did I hear her wrong? You said Noah, I mumbled, half asleep. Sunny chuckled. Did I? Huh. She tipped into her side. Well, I meant Jazz. The girl did say it was an accident, and I believed her. Slip-ups happened all the time, especially with recently dead souls with scattered memories. But then it happened again. Subtle, but I heard it. Noah? Peter was in the shower, shouting to his friend. Dude, you used all the shampoo? And then again. Sunny sitting in my car, nodding her head to music. The boys were grabbing food. I found an unlikely best friend who was Sunny the Wanderer. She nudged me playfully, that name leaving her lips so effortlessly. Noah hates this song. Sunny laughed. Crank it up when he gets back in the car. Noah. There it was again. They told me it was insignificant, that it didn't mean anything. However, I couldn't get this name out of my head, until I was standing in front of the boys' murder board, a perma marker in my hand. I added the name at the top with various townspeople and potential suspects. Noah. I don't know why I thought this situationship would last forever. Part of me forgot or just suppressed what they really were. Half a year after we started living together, I returned home from class to find them gone. They left everything, their mounting pile of evidence, as well as 3 dead bodies crumpled on my carpet. These people had been dead for months, their skin already rotting away. The college boy who Jazz had taken over was already decomposing. I had no idea how the drifters used human bodies, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I called the police, insisting they just dropped dead. Again, I was informed these people had been deceased for months. I was almost taken in for questioning before a woman stepped inside my house and calmly told them I was telling the truth. The woman didn't say anything, only slipping a scrap of paper in my hand. On it, a number. Written underneath in red pen. Are you having problem with strays? Strays. I preferred to call them drifters, not dogs. Jeez. Dumping the note in the trash, I tried to forget about the 3 wandering souls, but I found myself standing in front of their murder board every night. Why did they leave? Did they pass on finally? Did they find their killer, and if they did, why didn't they tell me before leaving? There was one name, apart from Noah, that continued to pop up in their notes. I don't even think they noticed. Middleview. There it was, in plain sight, highlighted in red and green, taped to each clipping. Middleview High School, Middleview Elementary School, Middleview Mayor, stepdad also the devil. It was the last mention that sends shivers skittering down my spine, right at the bottom, scrawled in block capitals. Middleview 4. That was the last thing Jazz had written before they left. I recognized his scrappy handwriting. Middleview was definitely their mysterious town, but no such town exists. I should know. I searched for it until my eyes hurt. And even if it did, wouldn't these murders make national news? The string murders, angel murders, The beauty pageant contests attacked with sulfuric acid, even the small cases from their childhood, the crazy woman with the World War II grenade, their drug-dealing janitor, even the missing baby. I scoured the internet for hours, every online article I could find, and nothing. Not one mention on the news, no coverage whatsoever. I spent days and then weeks trying to figure this thing out. Then it started to drive me crazy. When I threw a marker pen at my laptop, I knew it was time to get rid of it all. So I trashed everything and went back to normal life. All of my days blurred into one. I was sitting in class trying to concentrate when the girl sitting next to me went limp, her head dropping. Then the guy sitting in the front row, his head slamming onto his desk. I was leaning over in my seat to see if they were okay when warm hands rested on my shoulders. He was gentle at first, swaying me back and forth before wrenching my head back. Liam Carlisle had been sitting behind me. Now he was dead, his eyes lit up with fireflies. Jazz's expression was different, darker. His eyes were hollow. "I found my killer," he said before Liam's body tipped off of his chair. Cassie Eaton jumped up, her lips stretched into a maniacal cry. "It was my dad!" she shrieked, blood pooling down her chin. Cassie dropped, and Ryan Porter spun around, golden eyes burning. "Can you believe it?" he whispered, spluttering through a sob. "My dad, dude! I mean, I knew he hated us, but murdering us?" I was frozen watching this thing tear his way through my class, student after student. I watched their eyes light up before fizzling out, their limbs twitching. Signing us over to a psychopath who turned us into... 10 students were on the ground and Jazz was stumbling, struggling in a brunette's body. He was crying, clawing at her hair. "I was 17, man! Only 17! He was panicking, his breath coming out in sharp pants. "My dad, he did this to us." His lips split into a cry. "To protect himself!" Jazz didn't leave me alone. He jumped into random people passing by. "And do you want to know the best part?" He choked out, following me, staggering in an old woman's body. The old woman was too weak, crumpling to the ground. When I got home, a little boy with golden eyes was leaning against my door. "Don't ignore me," he snapped. Jazz's eyes were twisted, riddled with insanity. "I can't find myself," the kid whispered, tugging on my shirt. "I can't find my body, Freddy. I can't find Eve. I can't find my psycho dad, or even the town. I try, and it's like I'm stuck." The words were leaving my mouth before I could stop them. "You're stuck?" The boy nodded, sniffling. "Yeah, I can feel it sometimes. It's cold." He shivered. I forget he was just a damn kid. "I'm so cold, and it's dark." "Describe it to me," I told him. The little boy cocked his head. "Strings," Jazz whispered. "I can just see strings." I wanted to help him, but there was only so much I could do. The boy's town did not exist, and his murder was one giant question mark. He was sure his father had killed him and his friends, but now, and why? When I turned to walk away, he grabbed my hand. "Peter," Jazz said. "He says he's in the back of a car, but the car never stops." I held my breath, my eyes filling with tears. "Can you help us?" Jazz's voice broke. "Something bad happened to us, but He drifted off, thankfully leaving this kid with nothing but a nosebleed. He wouldn't leave me alone, recklessly jumping from body to spite me. Some of them survived, like my classmates. He only took control for a little over a minute, but it was with the ones he wanted to kill, tearing through people like they were puppets. When he appeared in my mother's body, purposefully hemorrhaging her brain right in front of me, I wouldn't listen to him. I went right back to that scrap of paper. You might think I was being cruel, but this kid had murdered at least 8 people. I watched him take over my mother, blood seeping down her chin, her skin paling, only to dive out of her like she was nothing, a puppet. I had to get away from him. Officially, Jazz and his friends were called strays. I called a number on the scrap of paper, and within 10 minutes, men and women in white were crowding my house. I didn't watch them extract him from the body he was currently in. His screams of terror, of pure childlike fright, were enough. The process took 15 minutes. When they were finished, the body was carted away, and a man was holding a bell jar in front of my face. There he was. Jas Carrington was nothing but a single spark of golden light, a firefly. "What do you do to them?" I asked a woman before they left. She answered me cryptically, reassuring me the recent stray possessions were being covered up by their service. "Okay, but what do you do to them?" I demanded. The door slammed in my face, and I was left feeling sick to my stomach. A year went by, and I stopped fearing wanderers or strays. Life seemed to pick up. I found a boyfriend and found myself pregnant, giving birth to a beautiful baby girl I named Carmela. I was singing to my daughter one night when she stopped crying abruptly, and I heard the sickening sound of her neck snapping, rivulets of red seeping through her lips. I felt my body freeze, before Carmela's lips formed a smile. "They take me apart." My baby's babble twisted into something inhuman, something terrifying. Carmela's eyes shining with fireflies around mine, my baby's blood staining my hands. "They take me apart and put me together. Take me apart and put me together. Take me apart and put me..." I dropped my baby, but she was already dead. "Together." My boyfriend was behind me, his breath grazing my neck. "Do you know how painful it is?" I was already screaming, wailing for my baby. "I spoke to her." Jas choked out a laugh, and she didn't even know my name. The crunch of his neck snapping, his body flopping against mine, paralyzed me. "Noah." His teeth gritted against my flesh, spitting venom. "Who the hell is Noah? And why did she keep calling me that?" He let me stumble forwards before freezing in place. There was so much blood. So much damn blood. I couldn't move. "She played with us?" Jas's voice was a soft whine. "Her Middleview 4. I started towards my baby, but he was already grabbing me, yanking me to him. "I know who I am," he said, "and I know where I am. I'm somewhere dark, cold, alive. I think," he sputtered out a laugh, "I think I'm on strings." I was staring at a monster, a boy driven insane by what had happened to him. My dead boyfriend's face contorted into his doll when I twisted around to stare at him, held in place by fireflies. "And you're going to help me find my body." My baby is dead. My boyfriend is possessed by a psychopath. And I'm on the road searching for a town that does not exist. Please, for the love of God, help me. And that's the end of the story. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider liking the video and subscribing for more. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you are anywhere else, like on the podcast or whatever, I'm not sure what your options are, but I mean, hey, if you're on Spotify, at least I can see the answers to the Q&A, so I love reading those. If you'd like to, I'd love it if you join the Discord and come hang out with the rest of us. It's a really cool and calm group of people, and you'll get to see some cool stuff and talk to some neat people. So, with all that said, I hope you enjoyed yourself. A huge shout out to my patrons for helping make this episode possible. I really appreciate it. And a huge thank you to you for listening. We'll see you in the next one.